You cannot make yourself whole again by brooding 100% of the time on the darkness of the world. We are the light of the world. There was Jesus standing there, and he knew that the Roman Empire seemed to be all powerful. He knew that he was no man of great political power. He controlled no government. He was not even a mayor. He was not in any university. What did he have? Where did his strength lie? It lay in some great spiritual force, which in fact was to turn the world upside down. The very Romans who were in charge of the world, they were the people who were to become the first major European force that was to become subverted by Christianity. Do you know what they felt as they sat there and they looked out at these Christians, these ridiculous people who believed in life after death and things like that, and they looked at them and they saw them going to the lion, some of them with smiles on their faces. Do you know what it is to have all the power in the world and sit there shaking, and to see men strong enough to face lions? Then you become aware of an enormous power on earth, a tremendous moral force. That moral force fades in and fails in people when they lose a sense of their worth. And they lose a sense of their worth when they begin to crucify their imagination. They begin to destroy something inside of them by constantly brooding on the worst aspects. You must be aware of the terror of your world. No doubt about that. You cannot go about in a dream. But the terror of the world is what should give you strength. That is the test of faith, the test of force. It is not something that is supposed to defeat you. It is something that is supposed to push you into a new life, a new situation. Everything that you possess, all the imagination and energy and faith must be brought to bear when you face that darkness. It is not intended for the human to succumb in darkness. It is intended for the human to rise and transcend over darkness. That is the meaning of the resurrection and the life. If we did not do that, if the black had not done that, the black would have disappeared, because no attempt to destroy a race has been so continuous, so systematic, so extraordinary, and yet that race survives. It not only survives, but it speaks with fantastic new vigor and power and confidence. We are involved in a restructuring of history. Even those who are powerful in their academies find they're being subverted. I speak now more and more to professors who 10 years ago would have torn me to pieces. Now they sit quietly, trembling, knowing that these ideas are like viruses, that you cannot contain them anymore, and they're here, unlike AIDS, there is no vaccine. So that we are involved in a struggle in which we will win. And one of the struggles is to make us aware of the fantastic capacity and potential that lay in our world. The Moorish story is one of the most hopeful stories on earth. Who are these Moors? The word Moor comes from Moros, which means dark, which the Greeks used, and then the Romans made it Mores, and then some people say it also came from Meroe. Moor came from Meroe. When Shakespeare uses it, he means black. Whether it is Othello, or whether it is the figure in Titus Andronicus, he sees the Moor as black. Not all the Moors were black. What really happened is that Arabia at first was completely black. Later Later, it was invaded by Asiatic or Semitic types. By the time of Muhammad, it was only 10% black. But the Arabians or the Arabs are not the only Moors. But let us first, before we come into the question of who are the Moors, because the Moors, of their 4 dynasties in Europe, 2 of them were overwhelmingly black. They were developed in Africa, and the first 2 had a very powerful and dominant black element. But how did this begin? How come black people invaded Europe? Because most of us know Europe invaded black countries, but very few of us are aware that blacks invaded Europe. And we have to make a comparison between the black invasion and the white invasion, because they're very different types of invasion. The black invasion enriched, lifted Europe, even though as all invasions there must have been some kind of punishment, but the white invasion sought to destroy utterly the cultures and language, even the humanity of the people they invaded. All invasions are not the same. When the Greeks, the first great Europeans, invaded Africa, they did not despise Africans. Even though they invaded them, they were spiritually invaded by the Africans, culturally invaded by the Africans, because the Europeans, the first Europeans who invaded Africa, this is before the slave trade, did not make slaves of the Africans. They made them their teachers. The Greeks, when they saw what the Africans had done, could not believe that Africa could be so advanced. They could not believe their arithmetic and their geometry and their calendars and their clocks and their medicine, even their religious system. Many of the goddesses that were taken into Europe were black goddesses. They worshipped the black woman. They worshipped the genius of the black man. The European never said anything against blackness at that point in time. In fact, he went overboard worshipping blackness. He made the goddess of wisdom black, Minerva, the goddess of chastity black, Artemis. Andromeda, who was to marry the great Greek hero, was painted black in the initial Greek vases. Circe, the enchantress in the Odyssey, was a black woman with African features. Medea, who had Jason win the golden fleece, she was painted black on Grecian vases. Isis, the sister wife of Osiris, was worshipped by Europeans just as Africans had worshipped her. Imhotep, who was known as Imhotep among the Greeks, was worshipped as a god. Is the great black multi-genius Imhotep. And every major Greek scholar went to Africa to study. Thales of Miletus, Democritus, Pythagoras, Eudoxus, Anaximander, Anaximenes, Heraclitus, they all poured into Egypt. Alexander built his city in Africa. So Africa was considered to be a cradle of civilization. There was no doubt about this. The doubts about this only began around the 18th century, when slavery had been put in this place. People started to, their Christian conscience started to be gnawed. How come these Greeks, who are our mentors, who are the fountainhead of European civilization, how come they keep insisting they got this from the black Egyptians? Surely Egyptians can't be black, because these are our blacks, they're our servants. How can we feel good if these are equal people like us, who in fact, before we enslaved them, actually have done things in advance of us? It doesn't sit well in our conscience. Therefore, there must be a mistake here. Black people cannot be the same black Egyptians. Therefore, something went wrong. Perhaps the Greeks didn't see well. Perhaps they got so excited about black people, they wrote down the wrong thing. They were subjective. Perhaps they weren't really talking about true black people. They were talking about white people burnt black. All sorts of excuses, and then a whole body of people got brought into the act.